Thanks for having us. I'm Marco.
I am Dan.
Let's directly dive in. The usual disclaimer came up before. It's our research, not official statement by RSA, of course. So maybe some of you wondered, and also that's feedback we got from some people, why we're going to talk about such a more unusual specific topic. And basically 2 years ago we had a talk at RSA already about OPSEC as a traveler, like physical OPSEC. And we're business travelers. I mean, probably most of you as well, like traveling around the globe to conferences, to meetings, stuff like that. And the protection of the life is of course important, but what's the next thing? Of course, for me personally, always hammering in my mind, what happens if something happens? You have friends, you have family. What will happen to what you left back? And this is not a depressing talk. It's not a negative talk or whatsoever. It's research. We're technical people, and we're just digging into that kind of direction, what we can do and what's reasonable.
Before that, I would actually like to mention the team we are part of, which is called GREAT, or Global Research and Analysis Team. This team is part of Kaspersky's R&D, and it was formed like more than 12 years ago. We are mainly focused on researching like advanced APTs and publishing our findings about them. Also, we are doing like research and innovation leadership. If you want to learn more about what we're doing in our team, you can check our website, securelist.com. We are publishing our research there. However, Marco mentioned that this talk is going to be about risk. And this talk is going to be about taking chances and managing risk. One thing we can be certain in life is that we will die at some point. I know it's dark, and I hope you don't get upset about me mentioning this one, but this is one true fact. And the problem is that people are not very good at managing risk and managing expectations. So Marco mentioned about like what happens with your data, inheritance of your data. And I would like to mention the fact that we are not giving out legal advice. So don't take our word as a legal advice. We are just here presenting to you our findings on what we researched and what we discovered are the best ways for you to be able to pass on data to your inheritance. But there are three main problems. The first problem is the fact that unlike physical properties like lands, a car, or something like that, data is something that is not clearly defined. So we might have some laws about like intellectual property rights, but for data itself, it's not clear. Secondly, we have the problem of, oops, sorry, I misclicked. We have the problem of the fact that if you look at this floppy disk, like I hope you remember floppy disk. I was like really young and I was using floppy disk. You know, you can define the physical properties of the medium, of the storage medium. It's here, you know, like 3.5 inch, 1.44 megabytes. But you cannot, it's very hard for you to define the properties of the data that resides on this medium. You know, what's the like storage, what's the format, etc., etc. The second problem comes, it's about inheritance of this data. So it's very easy for you to inherit your parents' house. No? There are laws about it, there are procedures, everything is set in stone. What about like property rights, intellectual property rights? Okay, you can inherit those as well. But what about inheritance in the context of digital data? Well, this has never been done before. You know, we didn't manage to find like clear rules, clear set of procedures of how do you inherit somebody else's data, if you're related or you're not related to that person. The third problem, and the most interesting problem, is that unlike properties, which are you know, located somewhere. Maybe your parents have like a house in San Francisco. It's there, you know, in this lot, this property, this street, this state. You might have another house somewhere else. Data can reside in multiple countries, in multiple storage mediums, and duplicates of this data can be in different locations at the same time. Furthermore, you can actually almost instantly right now transfer data from a location in Europe to a location in America, like that, you know, bam, I just moved my data. But the problem is that there are like multiple of legal implications that we will talk about this like in the following slides. So what did humankind came up with solutions to these problems that I mentioned before? Well, they did, you know, the good old like will. You know, your rich grandfather has like wrote a will. You've seen it in movies. You write a will and then you pass on your data to whoever you want to pass on the data to. Then, you know, banks came in, and these like wills are like since forever of time. Then banks came in and they said, okay, no, we provide you a safe storage box where you can put your data in there, like you put like, sorry, not your data. You can put your physical items in there, like valuables in there. You can put it there and then we can store it for you for up to, I don't know, like 100, 200 years, whatever. However, is this sufficient? Well, there are multiple cases where actors or like people who maybe you do not want to access this data might have access to this data. So think about of a bank heist, you know, robbers come in, they steal the box and they go away. So you cannot do anything about it. Or we've seen cases with like some also judges giving out warrants for law enforcement agencies to actually be able to go in and check out the data contents of that box. And maybe you do not want to for it to happen, this thing to happen to you, but it can happen. Okay, so considering these problems and I mentioned, what about like what should you consider? Well, there are like important parts that I would like to mention. First of all is inventory. So you have a bunch of data. You have your photos in Apple's cloud. You have your photos in your Google Cloud. You have like some documents in your like NAS storage. Various scenarios. Where is all this data? You have to make a list of this to make an inventory of your data. And this is the most crucial part. You need to know what you have. And then this is actually it's a lifelong process. Because in 10 years, maybe you might have some new documents, some new, I don't know, like cryptocurrency that you might buy, some new photos which are like super valuable to you. So this is not something that you do it once and you forget about it, but it's a lifelong process. You have to reflect, validate, and repeat. You have to consider what kind of data is important for you, where is the data located, and who should handle the data. And how does it, how is it handled? Secondly, think about the threat model that you might be affected with, like you might be like targeted with. So there are common threats, you know, ransomware attacks, data breaches. I was actually part of like a data breach. My accounts, some of my accounts were part of a data breach. So it happens, it could happen to all of you. It happens to like a lot of people like monthly. But then like let's see if you like narrow the circle a little bit, you might have like threats to your area or to your company. Think about it. You're like a famous you know, C-level executive. You have like some important documents. You might have like you might be famous. You might be like rich. You know, this kind of attackers might want to target you. Might want to target your data, to steal your data, because they already know that you're like a VIP. Maybe you're like an important neurosurgeon with like some cool research that you want to share. This is valuable for you, and this is valuable for the attackers. So they might target you. But they might target you because you work in like a facility, or you work in like some super interesting research group, etc., etc. And lastly, they might actually target you directly, as I mentioned before. So there are like three types of threat models which you have to consider about. And, you know, you might be like super secure, your devices are super secure, everything is like okay, but then you have make a mistake in the way of how you design this entire procedure of like giving out and passing on the data to your inheritors. And then that's the weakest link. And then you might have like all your devices super cool, but then this is the link that the attackers are gonna like use. And Marco is gonna talk furthermore about this stuff a little bit later. And then like access to your data. You know, this is like all common stuff, like 2FA, what do you use? Do you use usernames or passwords? Do you encrypt the data? How do you decrypt the data? Do you use like keys? Do you use like two-factor tokens, certificates? This is something you have to think about. I'm not gonna go like more in depth about this stuff. And then there's the problem of knowledge. Like how knowledgeable are you? I could say that I might be like above average knowledgeable, like in encryption schemes, in attacks, in ways how attackers are trying to steal your data. But I'm not knowledgeable in the laws of passing data, you know, I'm not good. So you have to think about like the knowledge, you have to think about the threat model, and the expertise of yourself, but also the expertise of the relatives or the people you want to pass the data to. Because maybe you are super good with this info, but the people who receive this data might not be good enough, might not be knowledgeable enough. So you have to identify the gaps, and you have to make sure that whoever receives the data and inherits the data is able to access it also. Now, this is an interesting part, because accessing the data, maybe you have this like cool scheme in your mind, you have this like amazing procedure, amazing like steps, you need to do that, you need to go to like make a phone call, then you need to unlock your server, log in on your like super remote VPS, and then from there you access and you like have the data. That's super cool, but if you don't pass this information to other people, if you don't tell them, hey, you know, I've secured my data in the best possible way I can, this is how you access the data, they will not be able to like, you know, if something happens to you, they will not be able to access it because they don't know how. So you need to create a clear description of what, where, and how to access the data. Write it down, you record yourself, you can do whatever you want. But then there's an interesting point. What do you think about the last point there I mentioned, Marco?
I think that's one of the most important things. It's not only how you inherit the data and how people can access it, but the steps they need to take in order to access certain information. Like let's take the simple example, Bitcoin wallet, just because it's quite easy to understand. People may not understand what is Bitcoin and what's the value in that. Maybe you have 1, 10, 100 Bitcoin in your wallet. A lot of money, right? But your relatives who will get this data may not understand this. So you need to explain them, to give them a motivation in order to take these steps, get the Bitcoin wallet, and use the data you're giving and you pass on to them in order that they succeed with your data. Because if they don't understand what you want to transport, they probably won't access it, and everything you got is lost, which could be kind of a problem, especially when it's like important stuff also for your relatives. You mentioned photos. Of course, the photos of your children, your grandchildren, your family, whatsoever, that may be interesting for people, but if they don't have this motivation to understand what you really want to give them, they probably would say, it's some tech stuff, meh. Let's leave the hands of that. It's too complicated, I don't understand it. So try to not only explain them how to access it, but also why. Give them the motivation. A house you can see, you can understand. A car as well. Digital data, not. It's a virtual good.
Think about like an example where, you know, like I've seen examples, I've read examples on the internet where there were like people who were checking in the attic of their like grandpa who just passed, or grandparents, and they found there like some interesting coin, medals, and they didn't know what they were, but actually in reality those medals were worth like a lot, and they were like very valuable because they were like super rare. But if you don't know what the data you have in your hand, then you don't know what to do with it. So it's very important to explain to the people you want to pass on what to do with this data. Furthermore, single point of access. It's been like discussed a lot in this conference, and you have to make sure that you create an environment where you don't lose your data due to either like wrong encryption or some different various problems that I will mention in the next slide. You have to make sure that whatever you do is resilient. Everything that you do can be decrypted. And now a little bit of warning about the encryption part. This is very interesting. So you have to think that you want to store the data and to secure the data for a long time. And there have been examples, like real examples, where encryption schemes that were considered secure at that time nowadays are known to be broken. Maybe in the future, like in 5 years, the encryption schemes that the encryption protocols that we know right now might be broken. So what do you do with that? Marco will discuss about it a little bit later. Lastly, there's like a huge array of dangers in what can happen, like physical events that can affect your data. For example, earthquakes, hurricanes, hardware failures. Let's say you keep your data on like some hard disks, and they can fail. Floods. There's like a really good anecdote. Like yesterday, a really large vendor of cloud computing reported that one of its data centers in Europe got flooded, so all the servers had to be like shut down. They had to like initially start like recovery procedures and failovers and this kind of stuff. So it can happen, like a data center got flooded. It's crazy, but it is like it's reality. Now I would like to pass on to Mr. Marco.
Having said that, let's take a step back and let's do a small game. Just think through with me. Let's say we're 30, right? We have a lot of time ahead. Retirement age 67 roughly, depending on the country. And the estimated death usually for that person would be about 80, just to make it simple, right? So we're talking about 50 years till death. Yeah, just common baseline. 50 years, what does it mean? Let's look 50 years back. 50 years back, 1973.
Long
the
time
first
ago.
Mobile phone call took place on April 3rd, cell phone. Skylab was launched. How many people do remember that? By NASA. It was the first space station from the United States. The TCP protocol, I mean, imagine that. The TCP protocol, that what we're, all of us using right now, was developed in that year. And just 1 year earlier, that's just a bonus information, the first email client was developed. I mean, that's the time span of 50 years. But maybe let's go a bit further. I collected a bit of information just to give you this perception of time, to understand what it really means living now and being prepared for another 50 years when it comes to your data. Companies. Digital Equipment Corporation, at that time, massive, like one of the market leaders in computers. They created, like in companies, they had their own networks, stuff like that, based on DEC. They existed just for 41 years. Doesn't meet 50 years. Compaq, big companies, workstations, servers, all over the place. They existed for 20 years, far away from 50. Sun Microsystems, huge, doing a lot in different areas, 3D graphics stuff, and I mean their Spark systems are super famous, existed for 28 years. Google is just in existence for 25 years. I mean, that big company, everybody, like, it feels it was there our whole lifetime, right? I mean, imagine a life nowadays without Google. Quite difficult. I wouldn't say like it's the only one, but just imagine that. 25 years. Microsoft, even Microsoft, just 48 years. None of them match the 50 years what we were talking about. Let's go a bit further. The iPhone, 16 years. GeoCities. Who remembers GeoCities? Ah, yeah. Good stuff, right? Just 15 years. Windows 1.0. I specifically took the oldest Windows version. Just 38 years. The IBM personal computer was released in 1981. Like the standard computer, basically. Just 42 years. And even Bitcoin, just because I mentioned it before, right? 15 years. Also, none of this matches the 50 years. Let's do a third try, right? Just because it's funny. Because we're talking about like storage media, you showed that nice icon about floppy disks. What's up with that? Hard drives. They have an expected lifespan of 10 years. That's far away from 50. CDs, 5 to 10 years. DVDs, 30 years. VHS, amazing VHS, right? 30 years. Music cassette, 10 to 15 years. Some, if it's like really the top quality, like this level 3 Chrome, whatever kind of crazy stuff, up to maybe 40 years, if they are stored correctly. I mean, we're talking about magnetic storage data, right? And a floppy disk, like this nice one, 10 to 30 years. And that's like 3.5 inch, like, of course, we had like 5.25 inch and 7 inch and 8 inch and all of kind of in between, probably not that much. So just imagine all of the big companies you know, all of the technology you're using, all of the storage media you may use for storing data. None of that will be ready for the next 50 years when we're looking back. So we have to think a bit further. We need to be prepared about that. That's always what I like about this perception of time. Like when you just imagine, you cannot store your stuff on a floppy disk, and when you die in 50 years, someone will be able to read that floppy disk. No, it just simply doesn't happen. Like that won't be possible. Besides that, floppy readers are already quite difficult to get nowadays, like new ones. Tricky. There are a few, but maybe not the right way to do. Okay, so what do we learn with that? We need solutions, right? I mean, we don't want to just talk about problems. We had a lot of problems. Let's go into the solutions. Next try. We want to store our data. Nowadays, we would maybe go with, let's upload it to some cloud storage. Yes, possible, but the problem with cloud storages is, if you just think about the companies I just mentioned before, tricky to find a company you're 100% sure they will exist in 50 years. It could be the market leader. There is no guarantee that they will exist in 50 years. I'm sorry to say that. Sorry, but that's the reality. We're in IT, there is no 100%, right? I mean, that's just fact. One option I found after digging through all of kind of storage media, and the most reasonable one, accessible one I could find from my own perspective, was MDisk. So what is MDisk? It's basically just a Blu-ray disc. Usually you have like large storage Blu-ray discs, it's called BDXL, like up to 100 gigabyte, for example. And there is this standard called MDisk, which are basically designed to last 1,000 years. Sounds good. You get a writer for that, for USB, whatever. You get the disk, cost a few bucks, but that's okay because you need some reliable storage when you want to pass on your data. I personally would go, and I also have it, like I just got me that stuff at home. It's nice, it's fantastic, it's something to do, and you have it under your control. Your control means the physical storage data is in the same country, means the laws of your country apply to it. As we learned, if you store it somewhere else, other laws may apply to it because the laws are always on the physical property, not on the digital property. Encryption, yeah, huge topic. Storing stuff as plain text, come on, everybody knows that's a no-go. Like, no way to go into that. But we're having quantum cryptography problem. Yeah, a lot of algorithms may be broken and just in the next 10 to 15 years. That's it, that's fact, like we know it. Maybe even earlier. After looking through a lot of things, there are new algorithms in progress. There is nice development going on. But for now, right now, the best solution you could do, which is easy accessible, would be AES because it's a symmetric algorithm, which is said to be relatively secure or resistant to quantum cryptography cracking kind of methods. And you have it basically in a lot of tools, like just use, I don't know, Packer stuff, things like that. You have that usually implemented quite easily. So accessible for the average person. There are, I just want to mention it, just not to leave you with, oh yeah, there are some encryption algorithms here that dot. There are some more advanced ideas as well. I personally didn't find them really reliable, but at least interesting to think about because maybe in future there may be some new developments into these areas. So for example, time-based encryption. So it's like time-locked and it will only start being able to be unlocked after a certain period of time, which could be quite interesting. But the problem here is, of course, we don't know when we will die, right? Tricky. And location-based encryption, that's something I found quite interesting. So you need to be at a certain place in order to decrypt the data. Yes, GPS spoofing exists, I know, but still it's quite an interesting, like just from the concept perspective, it's quite interesting. So maybe in future there may be something going on which could be even easier or more interesting also to be used when it comes to our use case, to inherit data. So we know the storage, we have the storage media, we have the encryption, that's good. Cool. What do we do with that? We have the disk. So what do? Just give it to your wife, your family, your, I don't know. That brings another problem because single point of access means maybe you have multiple relatives. If you give a copy to all of them, first come, first serve, right? I mean, just one Bitcoin wallet, 100 Bitcoin, the first one who accesses it gets it, right? Maybe not the best way to do it. I mean, inheritance shouldn't be a game. It should be a process. It should be fair. It should be as we want it to be with our will. So we need to talk about sharing of the secrets and of the data. Just one, not good. Also, you have to think about what if the other person you gave the stuff to will die before you. That's also not working out well, right? So we need a solution for that, right? What can we do? So there is this idea, basically, I derived it from multiple sources on how different other stuff is handled. And basically the idea is to have kind of two different groups. You have guardians and you have successors. successors are the ones who get your data. Guardians are just middlemen. You have like attorney, for example. Like usually when you do a last will, you should, in most cases, have some kind of attorney or whatsoever to take care about the legal side of things. So quite easy. If you have multiple people, you split out the decryption phrase and the storage medium through the different parties involved. So you can say, okay, the Guardian gets the encrypted data disk, and your successors all get a part, just a part of the passphrase. And at least 2 or 3 have to come together in order to unlock your data. Because, I mean, we're talking about 1,000 Bitcoin. Like in future, that will be, I don't know how many bazillion dollars, right? Just to avoid, and that's important, avoid this single point of access. If everybody has the same data, first come, first serve. We need to avoid that because else people will not be happy. And we don't want unhappy relatives. That's not good. Will cause problems. And additionally, that's specific about the US, by the way. I didn't know that because I'm from Europe. There is not this kind of law. Last will become a matter of public record. Which is quite interesting because if you put your private key for your Bitcoin wallet, yeah, let's stay with Bitcoin wallet because it's easier to transport the message, right? Could be anything else. If you put your private key in your last will, it will get public record, and then everybody can access the private key and get on your Bitcoin. So they may be gone before your relatives have access to it, which may be not the best case to do, but giving out free Bitcoin to whatever. I don't know. It can be anything. It could be your encryption passcode, your login data to your, I don't know, social media profile whatsoever. Maybe that's not something you want to do, so there are legal pit steps you have to be aware of. That's what I'm saying. So an ideal scenario is you have the storage media as well, you distribute it, you distribute the passphrase, split up as possible, depending on how many guardians and successors you have. I really like this scheme because this gives more reliable process on the structure, what you can do. So multiple peers, avoid single point of access. Very nice, very good. Going to the point. I used a backpack. What to consider, to sum it up. The data itself, of course, I mean, that's what we were talking about. Think about the software you need to access the data. This is specifically interesting because sometimes specific versions, if they're used to access data, may not be available in future anymore. We all know there is archive, websites and stuff like that, but still, certain information applications may not be accessible in 50 years anymore. You may virtualize stuff when you have it, but else could be a problem. You will on purpose. That's what I meant, the motivation. Why do your relatives want to access the data? Security notes, important. All of us are experts in this field. Our relatives maybe not. Give them some advice. How to handle data, how to behave with the data. And how-tos, very important. I like this part, not only written it down, but also audio and video recordings, because you can also add like personal messages and stuff like that. Guide them through the stuff, what you have. You do record some screen stuff, what you're doing, so people see it, understand it, and it's you in a virtual scenario giving it to them, which also leads, from my perspective, a very nice personal note. It's not just this, oh yeah, there's some data, but it's really this like you and a virtual person giving them access to this virtual digital inheritance. I like the idea. I think it's nice, and it will definitely help your relatives to work with it and use it. in the way you want it to. The life cycle, that's like the application, how to apply it, do the inventory. That's an ongoing process as mentioned before. This never stops. Every day, maybe you create new accounts, you make photos, videos, whatsoever. You buy new cryptocurrencies, you open new bank accounts, insurances, whatsoever. Most of that stuff is not physical anymore. Your contract, it's not physical anymore. You get emails with that, you have PDFs and whatsoever. It's all virtual data. And the easier it is to access it for your relatives, the better it is in future. Because just with the death proof running to institutions and trying to get access, this may take weeks, months, even years. And sometimes it's even impossible. So the easier and the more data you give them also for the regular stuff where you usually would think, oh yeah, that process is clear. No, it's not. Give them the data, what they need to access the stuff. Think about two-factor authentication. Think about all of that stuff. Protect it. Important. Storage media, we discussed about. Accessibility, software and how-tos. Distribution. Avoid the single point. Not failure, but access in this case, but it would basically lead to the same. Single point of access, a single point of failure if you have more relatives and inheritance and successors for your digital life. Thanks.
Thank you, Thank you very much. I know it was short, and actually we have time for quite a lot of questions.
Some questions, yeah.
Hello?
So this is more of a comment. I think there's a weakness there if you have a guardian because of the data or of the key, because they can die too. So you need to have some kind of successor or a way of passing on that trust relationship. So somewhere there needs to be some way of doing it. And I think that in a will or a trust, you can have a personal representative after you die. You're trusting that person to do things the right way, and they could then be that person, and then if they got in trouble for doing that, they could be sued by any of the heirs or the people that have been the money or the thing has been stolen from. The other comment I had was for photos and things like that, if you're not worried too much about them being accessed, you can make multiple copies in various different media, different places, and the distribution of it makes it more likely that you'll be able to get to it later on. With the Bitcoin thing, though, that's more important that you have it encrypted or have it protected. And anyway, those are my observations.
I fully agree. Thanks for your comments. Regarding the first one, I fully agree, and that's also why I think it's important to split it the right way. So not everybody will have either, also not the guardian, will have like the data and the full passphrase, but to split it out. Maybe you say the guardians will get the disk and you have multiple guardians.
Yeah, you could do like a 3 of 9. If you could do a key
exactly.
where it's like you only need 3 of 9,
yeah,
that might work.
This is done in basically in a lot of crypto protocols, like blockchain protocols, multi-signing of your data, but not signing, but encryption.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's the same.
And to the second one, fully agree. Like what you define as valuable data you want to inherit in the proper way, that's up to the people. With photos, I fully agree, but for example, I don't like to distribute my photos everywhere. I just want the right people to have access to it, and that's why I personally also take photos and stuff into consideration. For others, it's maybe, there is this shared cloud, whatever storage, and everybody has access to, like family storage, I don't know. That's totally fine, like absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for the comment, yeah.
Yeah, and it's not if you can come to the microphone, I just want to add that it's not only about like photos, you know, maybe you have like some company documents or like some really cool research that you want to pass on. So everything that you feel that should not be publicly accessible and needs to be encrypted, then there's a question of how do you do it, how do you reliably pass it on to somebody else such that they will not duplicate the data, abuse the data.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for the presentation. It was very, very interesting. My question is, what about the data on the web, on the internet? Like we say, once on the internet, forever on the internet. Does your lab working on this question? Once we are dead, until when our data will still live on the network? Thank you. Global network, I mean.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, that's of course a huge problem, what we have. I mean, our company is not working on this specific topic because it's a very complex topic which involves basically more than just one entity and all of that. But especially this how data lives on the internet. We had in Germany, for example, a special case about a social network. The daughter died and the parents wanted access to it. They failed after months and months and months of work. And that's why I mean, like, if you give your successors login information and stuff like that, that they also can wipe out information, delete information. That's exactly the stuff to do if you want to get rid of this data. And I think that's exactly the way to do, because none of the companies, and that was really frightening for me, like I looked at many, many different big players. None of them really have policies or legal binding applications. When someone dies, what happens then? With some, you may have access that you like disable accounts or whatsoever with the death proof, and others just don't care at all. And because of this lack of this legal, like there are no laws in place. Not in one country and globally as well not. That's exactly the problem. So pass that data on so your successors can exactly work on that problem for you. Hopefully, they will.
Thank you very much.
Just give them enough money in your last will and we'll be good.
So,
we're here if you have like some direct face-to-face questions afterward as well.
we're gonna be here.
Yeah.
I think there are no more questions. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you.
Thank you.